In this video, I'm going to do the entire lesson of factoring, and this lesson is going to be specific to quadratics that have two different variables in them, okay? We're going to have the x's and the y's, the a's and the b's. We'll kind of go through some of those. So we're going to use basically the same principles that we've learned with our other factoring. Now we just have an additional variable with it. All right, so just a little bit of review here. If I gave you this quadratic right here and asked you to factor it, the way that we factor this is I need two numbers that multiply together to give me my C value, but add together to give me my B value. Okay, well my C value in this case is 2. It's a positive 2. So and again, I need two numbers, so I just look there, what are my possible factors of 2? What times what gives me positive 2? Well, a 2 and a 1 would work, and a negative 2 and a negative 1 would work. If I multiply negative 2 times negative 1, that would also give me a positive 2. All right, but they have to add together to give me my B value, and the B value is the one before, we call this a linear term. So it's the one before the x in this case. In this case, it's 3. And it's a positive 3. So I look at my possibilities here. 2 plus 1 would definitely give me 3. Negative 2 plus negative 1 would give me a negative 3, so that one does not work. Okay, so when I'm looking at my factors, I'm trying to factor these into two different binomials. What that just basically means is two parts. So my first part is going to be x, and it's x because it's my variable in this case. All right, now I know that one of the factors is 2 and the other one is a 1, and they're both positive, so I just fill that in. Okay, so this is my, these right here are my factors of this one. And I know that I get the right factors because I can multiply these back in. You can either use the box method or you can FOIL it. And when I multiply these two together, I equal this original quadratic expression that I had way up here. Okay, x times x gives me my x squared. 2x plus 1x would give me my 3x, and then 2 times 1 would give me 2. Okay, so that one worked okay. All right, well now let's look at one that we have two different variables. I've got, and this is really similar to the one that we just did. The only difference is now I have this y. I've got this y squared at the end here. All right, and I've got a y here, and that kind of makes it really weird. Okay, so what I want you to do, and this is going to seem a little bit weird, a couple different methods with this, but this is the one I'm going to go through in this video, is what I want you to do is just pretend for a second that the y and the y squared are not there. Okay, so that just gives you this one, okay? The y and y squared are not there. You've done this before. This is the one that we just did. Okay, so we know what our factors are of that one, okay? I've got a positive 2 and a positive 1. Now, we're looking at this one, and I just know that this last one here has to equal a y squared. And the middle term has to be a y. That means I can't just go 1y, you can't go 1y squared. That wouldn't work, because I need the middle term to be a y. So the way that we're going to do this here, and this seems a little bit weird, but all I'm going to do is add a y at the end of this one and at the end of this one. If I add a y at the end of this one and at the end of this one, it actually works out perfect. I can multiply these back in. X times x gives me x squared. X times y gives me xy. 2y times x gives me 2xy. So now I have a 1xy and a 2xy. That's where I get my 3xy. And then my final one is 2y times 1y, which would give me 2y squared. So this does work. These are my factors here of this one here. The only difference is when you write it as a final answer, you would not write the 1 in front of it. You just write it just like this. Okay, so it seems a little bit weird, but basically we're going to factor it just like normal and then add this other variable in at the end. Okay, in this case it was y. I just added a y at the end, and that's it. So we're kind of using our the same process that we've used before. All right, so let's get a little bit of practice on this. Let me do one more example though before, just because it's so weird. Okay, so on this one here, I've got n and n squared here. What I want you to do just for a moment is just look at this without the n's. Okay, if I wanted to factor this one, I need two numbers that multiply together to give me my c value, but add together to give me my b value, which is negative 7. So my factors of negative 30, I list all of those factors. All of these multiplied together would give me negative 30. And I look at these factors here and I say, which ones of these, if I were to add them together, would give me negative 7? 10 and 3, let's see, that one would give me a positive 7. It has to be this one, a 3 and negative 10. So now essentially I can kind of fill this in. I've got positive 3 and negative 10. But if I were to multiply these back together, it would give me this one. The problem is that I need these n's. So all we're going to do now is just add an n at the end here. I add an n at the end, and that works. Okay, and again, you can always FOIL these back to make sure that it equals your original quadratic, which in this case it does. Okay, so now I'm going to have you get a little bit of practice. I've got these two here. What I'd like you to do is push pause on the video right now, and then I'd like you to actually work through these. After you've obtained both answers, come back and push play. Check your answers here. So hopefully you could identify on this one that it was -6 and +3, which then we just add the b at the end. And on this one we just add the y at the end is really it. You notice I have it written here with the b's in it. That's okay. If you want to do it this way, the other way that you can technically do this one is just your c value is your b squared. But either way works just fine. If you do it the way that I was explaining previously, that will work perfect. You end up with an a -6 and an a +3, and then we just add our b at the end. That will work. Order does not matter on these, so it doesn't matter what order you write these in. All right, I want you to get a little more practice on this. So push pause on the video now. After you've obtained your answers, come back and push play. Check your answers here. Okay, for number 2, I do want to address this. These are your factors. This can be your answer, or this one. Either one I'll take. If you just do the squared on that works just fine for me too. So, all right, I want you to get one more practice here before we move on. So go ahead and attempt both of these. After you've obtained your answers, come back and push play. Check your answers on both of these. And again, on number 2, it doesn't matter which order you write these two in. Hopefully you could find out on this one that it was a -6 and a +8 would give you the -48. Then we just add our v on at the end. Okay, so now let's look at this one, and this one looks fairly daunting. Remember that when we factor, the very first step that we have to do is see if there are any common factors we can pull out. I've got an m and an m here, but no m in this one, so that doesn't work. An n I've got in these two, but not in this one, so that doesn't work. But I do have a 5 that goes into all 3 of these. So what I'm going to do now is take my 5 out. Now that I take my 5 out, I have this middle part that I've got to factor. And again, I'm going to just view this as if the n's don't exist. Okay, knowing that this is wrong, we'll go back in and fix it in just a minute. So I need 2 numbers that multiply together to give me -30, but add together to give me -7. We did this one earlier. I'm going to go through it though. And I look here, my 2 numbers that multiply together give me -30. I've got lots of options here, but only one of them, this one right here, -10 and a +3, would give me a -7. So now notice how this 5 stays. This 5 is going to stay with me the entire time. Okay, so my 5 stays. I've got +3 and -10. Now, of course, this does not equal my original one because I have n's in there. So n at the end here of the 3 and the 10, and that would give me my factors there. So this would be your entire answer. This 5 does stay. Remember that we have to be able to multiply all these back in to give me my original expression. So let's have you get a little bit of work on these. Go ahead and push pause on the video now. Go through and work these out. After you've obtained your answer, come back and push play. If you need to, just rewind just a little bit, and that will give you the example that you can go on. Check your answers here. Okay, remember that the 4 and the 6 stay on both of these two. All right, now, let's talk about this one for a second. This one was kind of our special cases, if you think of it that way. But we followed the same rules. 2 numbers that multiply together to give me c, and in this case, c, or a times c, doesn't matter, is -25, and b, in this case, there isn't a b, so b is 0. So 2 numbers that multiply together to give me -25, but add together to give me 0 would be +5 and a -5. So I just write those answers down. Okay, now, that works, that's great. But I'm going to show you a major shortcut here, and this is really going to help us as we go throughout. The shortcut is if the first one is a perfect square, and the last part is a perfect square. 25 would just be 5 times 5. All we're going to do is write both of these. I'm going to start with an x. There's my perfect square, my first one. My perfect square, my last one is a 5, then a 5, and then I write 1 positive, 1 negative. It doesn't matter the order. Okay, so let's look at this one. In this case, my first one is a perfect square. It's x times x. My last one is a perfect square as well. And this is a 2y times 2y. So I fill this in, 2y times 2y. Now I just write a plus and a minus. And it doesn't matter what order you write those in, but a plus and a minus, and this would give it to you. So again, it's a perfect square. I write that down. Let's rewind just a little bit here. Perfect square, I write those down, x and x. My last part is a perfect square, so I write those 2y and 2y. And then I do 1 positive, 1 negative. Let's try that again here. This is one that's just a little bit more complicated. This first part here is a perfect square, though. If you notice on that one, it should be a 3m times 3m. My last part as well is a perfect square. That is going to be a 5n times a 5n. I just write those in now. I just do a plus and a minus in between them. And those would be my factors. If I were to multiply all this back in, 3m times 3m gives me my 9m squared. Okay, and 5n times negative 5n would give me my negative 25n squared. And the middle parts here will cancel each other out. All right, so I want you to get some practice on these. Push pause on the video now. Work these out, factor these. After you've obtained your answers, come back and push play. Check your answers on both of these. Hopefully you're kind of starting to get the hang of it just a little bit here. Okay, I want you to factor both of these. Push pause on the video now. Go through and work out your solutions. After you've obtained your factors, come back and push play. Check your answers here. This first one, we have a perfect square on the first one and the second one. The second one here, though, we did not, so we just had to factor it like normal. And again, if you just kind of ignore this b from the start, then we go, okay, two numbers multiplied together give me negative 28, but add together to give me 3. That would be negative 7 and 4. Then we just add our b in at the end. Try these two. Go. Check your answers here. Okay, hopefully you're starting to kind of get this down a little bit. I want to give you a little bit more practice here. Push pause on the video. After you've obtained your answers, come back and push play. Check your answers. All right, this will be our last one. I want you to try these two after you've obtained your answer. So push pause on the video now. After you've obtained your answer, come back and push play. Hopefully you struggled on number 2 a little bit. You found out that number 1, both of those two are perfect squares. Number 2, the first one is a perfect square. The second one is not a perfect square, so this one is not factorable. There's nothing we can do there. All right, well, this concludes the video. If you'd like to, go back in and watch the video a couple times. Rewind it to some spots that you may have struggled with a little bit. Hopefully that helps a little bit. I do have some other videos on my YouTube channel that you can look at as well.